Have you ever met someone, a stranger on the street, forgotten by the world, yet somehow they felt familiar? Not by face, not by name, but by something deeper. A pull, a connection you can't explain. That's what happened to Richard Lawson. By every measure of success, he had it all. Money, power, a view from his high-rise apartment that stretched far beyond the skyline. But behind all that glass and steel lived a man consumed by silence. 10 years ago, Richard lost the only person who ever truly knew him. Emily, the woman who softened his rough edges, who taught him how to love, who died with a secret, one that would change everything. But that part of the story comes later. For now, picture Richard, walking the city alone. It's the day before he visits her grave, like he does every year. He doesn't know why he took that street, why he turned that corner, why he stopped. There, sitting on the cold pavement, was a woman wrapped in a tattered coat, her eyes distant but aware. No sign, no words, just stillness. He almost kept walking, but something made him pause. Her eyes, they reminded him of Emily, not just in color, in sorrow. So he did something he hadn't done in years. He spoke. Richard, softly, hesitant. "Are you hungry?" She didn't answer, just looked up. He bought her a meal, booked her a motel room. No conversation, no promises, just a moment of strange, human connection. He left thinking nothing of it. But the next day, as he stood at Emily's grave, surrounded by quiet and memories, he saw her again. The beggar, the same woman, kneeling at the headstone, placing a flower gently into the grass, as if she'd known Emily too, as if she'd mourned her. And in that moment, time bent, the world shifted, because the woman Richard helped wasn't just a stranger. She was connected to the very past he'd buried for a decade, and what she would reveal would unravel everything he thought he knew about Emily, about love, and about the family he never knew he had. This is a story of grief, secrets, and second chances, of how a millionaire found something money could never buy, and how one small act of kindness opened the door to a life waiting to be reclaimed. Stay with me. The journey is just beginning. In a city that never sleeps, some people live wide awake, moving fast, talking louder, filling silence with sound and motion. But not Richard Lawson. To the world, he was sharp, confident, a self-made man with numbers in his head and steel in his eyes. Founder of Lawson Holdings, owner of 3 properties across the coast, invited to all the right rooms. But inside, Richard was somewhere else entirely. Every morning began the same. He woke up alone. Silence. No messages. No footsteps in the hallway. Just the echo of a life that once had laughter. He brewed his coffee. Black. Always black. Just like she drank it. And then he'd sit in the same chair by the window, watching the world move below. It had been 10 years since Emily died. 10 years since the accident. 10 years since he buried the only person who ever made him feel seen. She was his compass, his balance, where he was logic. She was light. He built his empire with her by his side. And when she was gone, he kept building, but never stopped breaking. Grief doesn't announce itself. It lingers, quiet, patient, and for Richard, it had become part of him, like the suit he wore each day, like the watch on his wrist that no longer kept time for anyone but him. He never remarried, never dated. He tried once, but every dinner felt like betrayal, because no one could laugh the way Emily did. No one could challenge him like she could. No one else knew that he hummed when he read contracts, or that he was afraid of thunder. Only Emily, on the day before her memorial, the one day he allowed himself to fall apart. Richard skipped work. No meetings, no schedules, just him and the ghosts. He walked the city like a man sleepwalking through his past. Same streets, same thoughts, but then something different. He turned a corner, and there she was. She was sitting on the curb outside a bookstore, knees pulled close, coat wrapped tightly. She wasn't begging, wasn't speaking. She was just still. Her hair was tangled, Her cheeks smudged, but her eyes were sharp, alert, full of something he couldn't name. And for some reason, Richard couldn't look away. He reached into his wallet, hesitated, walked past her, then stopped. She looks like her. It wasn't just the shape of her face. It was the weight in her expression, the silence she carried, the same silence that followed Richard everywhere. He walked back. "Are you hungry?" She looked up, startled but calm. She didn't speak, just nodded once. He bought 2 sandwiches from the corner deli, gave her one, and handed her a small envelope. Inside, a room key and $100. No questions, no sermon, just help, thank you. He didn't expect the words. Didn't know why he did it. But for a moment, just a moment, the weight on his chest lifted. Back home, Richard sat by the window again. But this time, the city looked different. He watched people move in the rain, watched lovers holding umbrellas, watched a child chase pigeons. And he thought of the woman, thought of Emily, thought of how he still hadn't said goodbye. Because grief isn't just pain. It's unfinished conversation. It's the apology you never gave, the future you never got to live. The next morning would be hard. It always was. Every year, he'd visit Emily's grave, stand in silence, lay down a single white lily. But this year, someone else would be there, too, and what she would reveal would change everything Richard thought he knew about love, about loss, and about the life he had left to live. One moment of compassion, one quiet act, and the walls begin to crack. Sometimes the first step toward healing is the one you never meant to take. Richard arrived at the cemetery just as dawn broke. The gates creaked open, and a lone path led him to Emily's stone. Polished marble, etched with her name, her dates, her memory. He had visited this place every year on this date, but today felt different. He caught sight of a dark figure kneeling beside the headstone, long coat pulled around her feet, hair falling forward like a veil. He hesitated, breath caught in his throat. The woman looked up. Their eyes met, and time snapped. Recognition struck him like a blow. The same ragged face he had fed only hours ago. The same hollow gaze that stirred in him a memory he didn't know he'd retained. She rose slowly, folded her coat around her shoulders. In her hand was a single white lily, Emily's favorite flower. Richard's throat tightened. "Why are you here?" His voice was low, controlled, but trembling. She stared at the grave for a moment, tracing Emily's name with a slender finger. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Her name is my mother." Richard's heart slammed against his ribs. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble. Emily had a daughter? It was impossible. He remembered every detail of their life together, every shared secret, every whispered dream. There had been no hint, no confession. He reached out as if to touch her face, but stopped, frozen. "My name is Sophie," she said, looking up. Her eyes shone with something between hope and fear. "You knew Emily Lawson. You loved her." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I loved her more than anything." Sophie's lips trembled. She swallowed, then lifted her coat to reveal a small photograph pinned inside. She pressed it into his hand. It was faded, edges curled, a baby in Emily's arms, smiling. He recognized Emily's face instantly, radiant, young, proud. And the baby impossibly beautiful, with Emily's eyes and Emily's hair. "Is this true?" he whispered. Sophie nodded. "I'm her daughter." "Your daughter." The world tilted. A decade of pain, 10 years of questions, 10 years of silence. All rushed back. The memory of Emily's funeral, his tears staining her casket, the empty house he returned to every night. He staggered, nearly losing his footing. This revelation wasn't just a shock. It was a rupture. What? How? His voice cracked. "Why didn't she tell me?" "She was afraid," Sophie said, voice breaking. "Afraid you'd leave. Afraid you'd never forgive her. She carried that secret because she loved you too much to risk losing you." He looked back at the grave, at Emily's name engraved like a promise. He thought of the life they had planned, children, birthdays, anniversaries. None of it had ever existed. How could she have kept this from him? How could he have missed it? Sophie stepped closer, gently placing her hand on his arm. She tried to tell you, she said. When she recovered from giving birth, she wrote you a letter. She never mailed it. She left it on your desk the day she died. Richard's breath came in ragged gasps. On his desk at home, the one place he never allowed anyone, no one, to enter, the letter must be buried among old contracts and stock certificates. He had never looked. She wanted you to know, Sophie continued. She thought if you read her words, you would understand. But she died before she could send it. Richard closed his eyes. Pain and regret scraped at his chest. He had buried Emily's body, but he had never buried her regrets, her wishes, her secrets. Now they lay unspoken, trapping both of them in a web of misunderstandings. Emily, he murmured, voice thick, why didn't you tell me? Sophie shook her head. She swallowed, fighting tears. She thought you'd hate her. She thought you'd never forgive her for letting her guard down, for letting someone else into your life. Richard's mind raced. I would never have left her, he said softly. I would have fought for her, for us. Sophie looked at him, searching his face. I know that now, but she didn't, and I'm here because I had nowhere else to turn. He looked at Sophie's face, the echo of Emily's laughter in her eyes. A daughter he had never known, a granddaughter he had never held. His world, built of spreadsheets and skyscrapers, suddenly fell hollow. He realized how little he knew of love's true shape. He kneeled beside Sophie, placing a hand on Emily's gravestone. Tell me everything, he said. Start at the beginning. Sophie nodded, tears leaking down her cheeks. She took a deep breath, looking out across the rows of stones. My name is Sophie Clark, she began. Emily got pregnant when she was 18. It was a shock. She was still finding herself. She loved you, but she was scared. She didn't know how you'd take it. She thought she was protecting you. Richard swallowed, pressing his hand to the cool stone. He closed his eyes and could almost hear Emily's voice. I loved you too much, she had written, but I was afraid. Sophie continued. She gave me up for adoption, trusting that I'd have a better life. But she never forgot me. She found me when I was 12. She sent letters, visited when she could. We were close. She told me about you, how amazing you were, how kind. She was so happy when she said you'd asked her to marry you. Richard's chest ached. Memories of Emily glowing with anticipation. Speaking of their future, he had stood by her side, blind to the secret that lingered between them. Sophie pressed on. Then she got sick. The treatments left her weak. She wrote that letter to you. She planned to mail it that night, but the accident, she choked back a sob. She never made it. Richard closed his eyes, imagining Emily's trembling hand writing each line, her heart pounding with fear and hope. He saw the unsent letter lying on his desk, gathering dust and silence. I spent years looking for her, Sophie said quietly. After she died, I had nothing. No home, no family, just this grief. She pointed to the grave. I came here because I thought I'd feel close to her, and then you helped me. Richard opened his eyes. He remembered the sandwiches, the motel key. I didn't know, he whispered. I didn't know you were her daughter. Sophie looked at him, tears shining. You do now. He stood, feeling the weight of a decade pressed down on him. Let's find that letter, he said. I need to read her words. I need to hear her. Sophie nodded. Come to my place, she said. I have a folder of her letters, photos, everything she left behind. I've kept it safe. Richard brushed a hand through his hair, resolve kindling. Then let's go. They walked side by side out of the cemetery. Two strangers bound by the same grief, the same love. The sky was gray, but Richard felt a spark of something new. Curiosity, hope, the long-awaited next chapter. As they reached the gates, Richard paused and looked back at Emily's stone. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Sophie placed a hand on his shoulder. She understood, she said softly. She loved you always. And now we both get a chance to heal. Richard exhaled, feeling the first tear slip free. For the first time in 10 years, he allowed himself to cry. For Emily, for the lost years, for the daughter he never knew. He looked at Sophie, her face illuminated by that single white lily, and realized that grief, when shared, could become the bridge to redemption. Together, they walked away, and the ghosts of the past began to fade, making room for new memories yet to be made. Richard followed Sophie through the narrow streets of the city, their footsteps echoing softly between worn brick walls. She led him to a small apartment tucked away above a bustling cafe, a modest space filled with worn furniture, scattered photographs, and the scent of old paper. Inside, Sophie motioned toward a worn wooden desk stacked with envelopes and letters, some yellow with age, others crisp and new. On top lay the letter Emily had written but never sent. Richard hesitated for a moment before carefully unfolding the delicate paper. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, neat, flowing, yet trembling at the edges. His voice caught as he read aloud the words Emily had never spoken. "My dearest Richard, I hope one day you'll understand why I kept this secret from you. I was scared that this truth would change everything between us. But my love for you never wavered, not even for a moment." As he continued, memories of Emily flooded his mind. Her laughter, her warmth, the way she looked at him with such trust and hope. Sophie watched quietly, tears pooling in her eyes. When Richard finished, he folded the letter slowly and looked up at her. "I never knew," he said softly. "I never imagined she was carrying this burden alone." Sophie nodded. She didn't want to lose you. She thought hiding the truth was protecting you. "But it hurt us both," Richard replied, voice thick with emotion. They sat in silence, the weight of years pressing down. For Richard, it was a mixture of anger, betrayal, and profound sadness. How could Emily keep such a secret? And yet, beneath the pain, he understood the fear and love intertwined in her choice. Sophie broke the silence. "I'm not here to blame you, Richard. I just wanted you to know the truth, to understand who I am and who Emily was." He reached out and took her hand gently. "Thank you for trusting me." Over the following days, Richard and Sophie talked long into the night, sharing stories, answering questions, and slowly dismantling the walls that years of silence had built between them. Richard spoke of his grief and loneliness, of nights spent haunted by memories and regrets. Sophie shared her own struggles, growing up without a mother, searching for answers, and finally finding a family she never expected. The conversations were not easy. Anger surfaced. Old wounds reopened. But with each honest word, healing began. Richard realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the pain. It was about accepting the imperfect truth and embracing the possibility of new beginnings. As the days passed, he started to see Sophie not as a stranger, but as a bridge to Emily, a living reminder of love's endurance. The journey ahead would be difficult, full of uncertainty and vulnerability. But Richard knew he was ready to face it, because sometimes the hardest truths lead to the deepest healing. Weeks passed, and with every visit, Richard felt the invisible walls around his heart soften. The fragile threads of trust woven between him and Sophie began to strengthen. One crisp morning, Sophie invited Richard to meet someone very important, her son Daniel. Richard's heart pounded as he approached the small playground where children's laughter filled the air. He saw Sophie kneeling beside a boy, roughly 7 years old, with curious eyes and a shy smile. Daniel looked up and froze for a moment, unsure of this tall man standing beside his mother. But when Richard smiled gently and extended a hand, the boy relaxed. "Hi, Daniel," Richard said softly. I'm Richard." Daniel's eyes sparkled with a mixture of curiosity and hope. He took Richard's hand, a small gesture that spoke volumes. Over the following weeks, Richard made an effort to be present in Daniel's life. They went to the park, played catch, and Richard read bedtime stories, fumbling at first but learning quickly. Each shared moment chipped away at the loneliness that had gripped Richard's soul for so long. He marveled at how much Daniel reminded him of Emily, her quick wit, her bright smile, and that unmistakable spark in his eyes. Sophie watched cautiously, but with growing warmth, as Richard navigated his new role. She knew trust wouldn't come overnight, but she saw the sincerity in his actions. There were moments of awkwardness. Richard unsure how to discipline, Daniel testing boundaries. But slowly, a family began to take shape. One afternoon, as they sat together watching the sunset, Richard felt something he hadn't in years, a genuine sense of belonging. He realized that family wasn't just about blood or shared history. It was about showing up, being present, and choosing love every day. Daniel tugged at Richard's sleeve and asked, "Will you come to my school play?" Richard smiled, heartful. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." As the days turned to months, Richard embraced this new chapter, discovering joy in the simple things. A child's laughter, a mother's gratitude, and a quiet hope of a future built on second chances. The man who had once lost everything was learning how to find himself again. Richard sat alone in his study, the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminating stacks of papers and photographs scattered before him. But tonight, his mind wasn't on business or numbers. It was on the family he was slowly embracing, a family he never thought he'd have. The journey had not been easy. There were days when old wounds flared, when memories of Emily brought tears instead of comfort. There were moments of doubt, questions about whether he was enough for Sophie and Daniel, whether they could truly be a family. But every time uncertainty crept in, he reminded himself why he kept moving forward. Because love isn't perfect. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes painful, but it's also the force that can heal the deepest scars. He looked at a photograph of Emily, Sophie, and Daniel, the three women who had changed his life forever. In that moment, Richard understood that his legacy wouldn't be the fortune he amassed or the buildings he owned. It would be the family he chose to nurture. He thought back to the day he first met Sophie on that cold city street, and the unexpected kindness that had set everything in motion. That small act had blossomed into something far greater, a chance to heal, to forgive, and to build something new. Richard vowed to be the man Sophie and Daniel deserved, not just a provider, but a presence, to show up not just with gifts, but with time, patience, and love. He envisioned the years ahead. Birthdays celebrated with laughter, stories shared by the fireplace, and quiet moments of understanding that would weave their lives together. The past would always be part of their story, but it would no longer define them. As dawn crept to the window, Richard closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was ready, because sometimes the greatest legacy we leave behind isn't what we build, but who we love and how deeply we choose to care. Sometimes life surprises us in the most unexpected ways. A single moment of kindness, a chance encounter, can open doors we thought were long closed. For Richard, helping a stranger led him back to the love he thought he lost forever, and to a family he never knew existed. This story is more than just about loss or secrets. It's about healing, forgiveness, and the courage to face the truth, even when it's hard. It reminds us that it's never too late to rebuild what's broken, to let go of the past, and to open our hearts to new beginnings. We all carry burdens, memories, regrets, wounds that weigh us down. But sometimes, sharing those burdens with others can help us heal. Love has a way of finding us when we least expect it, often disguised as pain or struggle. So ask yourself, what are you holding on to that's stopping you from moving forward? What walls have you built that could begin to crumble with just one act of kindness? Richard's journey shows us that healing starts with a single step, reaching out, forgiving, and embracing the imperfect, beautiful mess that is life. If this story has touched you, let it be a reminder. Look around. Notice the people in your life who might need your compassion. And don't be afraid to open your heart. Because in the end, what truly matters is the love we give and receive. Your next step could be the beginning of your own healing story.